Hello and welcome to another one of my slide-in truck camper build updates. This is kind of the condition that I left off at last week. I started out by cutting the vertical 2x2s that I installed right at the end there and began working on the platform that will support the bed. And initially, it was just going to extend from the outer wall forward and be supported on the sides, but this cutout that I'm making here allows the main, longitudinal supports to extend further into the camper area, and so I get to connect not just on that forward wall, but on the wall behind it where the kitchen and the nook area are sectioned off. I just figured that would give me a lot more strength, and since I only have so much confidence in this Luan plywood that I'm using, I try to be redundant wherever I can. So here I'm cutting out the bottom panels, and you can see I was fitting them there, and then I'm doing essentially the same kind of sandwich panels as I've been using for the bulkheads and other internal vertical walls, except that instead of laying the 1x2s flat, I'm putting them vertical so that I get a stronger beam across there in the sandwich panel, a little more separation. Plus I'm using them a lot more, or I'm spacing them more densely, closer together, and I'm going front to back, since the platform is sized to be just a little bit bigger than a queen mattress. I believe that's about 60 by 80 inches. So the 60 is the distance forward of the outer wall there. And since that's the shorter span, and the camper itself is wide enough to do the 80 across, then I just figured that would be the shorter the span is, the less structure I have to build into the panel. I mentioned in my intro video that I originally considered just putting room for a twin mattress on there, but just so that later on resale value or changes in my life, I may regret only having room for one person up there, and so I'm going with the queen. Orienting it left to right instead of forward means that whoever's sleeping against the front wall has to crawl over the second person in the night, but that's just how it is. For me, I'm probably going to put the twin mattress against the front wall and put or utilize the rest of the space for hanging clothes, kind of as a closet, maybe a clothesline area up in the front. So the two panels on the bottom, one is 4 feet wide and the other is whatever remains to make up the distance, and then on the top the panels will be staggered so that the 4-foot panel will be on the other side, and so there will be some crossover. There's a picture a little later that will show that. That way I avoid having a seam in the panels themselves, one on top of the other. And where the panels butt up against each other, I'm putting 2x2s in those two central areas, whereas the rest are all 1x2s. That gives me enough to put staples on both sides. So here I'm getting one of my warped 2x4s. The first one just wouldn't lay flat enough at all. This one I decided I could probably work with it. I had to fiddle with it a little bit in the table saw to try and get two edges parallel enough, and it was still a little warped even when I put it on there. But I was concerned, will the warp throw off my panel assembly, or will the assembly be stronger and straighten out the 2x2? In the end, it looked like the panel won out and the 2x2 started to behave itself a little better. And so here I am putting staples on both sides of the panel, or on the 2x2 on both sides of the panel. Now this insulation, as I've explained, I'm trying to minimize thermal bridging in my build. So this insulation here isn't really for thermal purposes at all. Underneath this entire panel there will be another 2-inch panel of the pink foam with a layer of plywood and fiberglass on the outside of that, and that's the real insulation. In the real purpose of this foam here is to protect the plywood. In the very bottom of my camper right now, since I don't have the floor up on top of the bulkheads, I only weigh about 125 pounds, but if I stand on down in my little cargo bays, there are slats very similar to this like panel construction here that are about 9 inches apart, and if I put my heel on there, I can hear it cracking the plywood or the joints, whatever, between them, and that's doing damage obviously, as it cracks the plywood. And then I'm concerned about getting the same issue here. I could obviously put thicker plywood or some other material, but I've opted for putting the foam in there. This isn't the high density foam. I couldn't get that locally in 1.5-inch thicknesses, if it's even available in the pink stuff. That would have been my preference, but this in testing it seems to be good enough. My concern is that yes, while standing I can crack it, and I'm concerned that a similar thing could happen between the slats because they're similarly spaced on this panel. However, it's a bed area. There's only about 3 feet floor to ceiling. You can't stand on it, and you'd have to be an acrobat or working at it really hard to balance all of your weight on one spot to concentrate like you would when you're standing. However, most of our body weight is in your upper body, and there's the possibility that someone, especially someone bigger than me, could put an elbow into this thin plywood and crack it. And so the main purpose of this foam here is to disperse some of that weight out into the panel, and that seems to be pretty effective that way. As I'm standing on it doing the stapling and whatnot, I don't hear that cracking. For most of for me being lighter, it's not going to be an issue, and when the mattress is on top of it, then it absolutely won't be a problem. And obviously if there's a queen mattress, then it will cover the entire area, so it really shouldn't be a problem. Only under kind of the edge case use cases would I think that it ever be an issue, but I think it is enough of a problem that I decided to put the foam in there. When I say a question might come up, why not just use this as my external wall? Well, if you do the math or look it up, each one of those slats, as I've calculated, according to my research, the wood is about 4 times as conductive as the foam. And so if that were my external wall, I wouldn't have a very good insulating wall. And so that's why I'm doing a separate panel on the outside, because all of those slats so close together create thermal bridges, and that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to avoid in my build. However, I don't want condensation or anything forming under there, so it displaces the air, and like I said, it structurally kind of protects it from getting punched in by somebody's elbow. So here I'm cutting out the upper panels. When it came time to joining everything together, I took a similar approach to what I did with the other panels that I've made. I use wood glue to join the initial 1x2s with the first panel, and then on the second side I use liquid nails because the 1x2s aren't always that consistent size or thickness wise, and so there tends to be more gaps and unevenness on the other side. I did put some goo on the foam itself, but only on one side, and you'll see on the other side I ran out of liquid nails and didn't even cover it completely. I don't think it has any structural benefits really. Just I don't know, emotionally it feels like there should be some glue there, but I really don't think it's going to matter. The rest of the real structure is wood to wood bonds, not the foam itself. You saw me with a straight edge before. I marked all of the placement of all of the 1x2s underneath, so I'd know where to staple them ahead of time. However, you'll see on this second panel, when I come to staple it, I'd forgotten to do that, so then I just used the straight edge at the time I stapled it up and took care of it that way. Yeah, see, I didn't have enough glue to cover it there. My gun was giving me grief, and I've kind of had that issue. I'm running at as low a pressure as I can because it just punches right through that soft plywood, and so to minimize the damage, and of course they're not effective if they're cut all the way through, I keep the pressure as low as I can, but it seems like I'm getting, at times I'll get every other staple will fire, and a lot of times it's just a misfire. And I don't know, this is my first real I've done roofing with nail guns, but they were quite a bit different, and I was running at full pressure, and so this is kind of a new experience for me. If anybody knows, I wouldn't mind being enlightened. If air pressure could be causing it to misfire, I don't see how. Okay, here it shows the overlap. The top panel and the bottom panel, the break in plywood panels is staggered across there, the 1x2s. So here I'm prepping, and my sister-in-law Danielle, who helped me get those sidewall panels on a week ago, she helped me to set this in there because it wouldn't seem like it, but little by little that all starts to get kind of heavy and awkward, and so I left the camera, or I've left some of this extra footage. We're just kind of yammering here and pointing things out and brainstorming, but I kind of wanted to show a little bit of perspective with a couple people standing inside. Well, that's about it for this week. Next week I'll be beefing up the area around that panel and getting it installed. Thanks for watching. See you next time.